When I was about 10 or so, my family and I moved into an old house that was built back in the 80s. Even though it was well over 40 years old, it was still in pretty good condition and was still worth money. We had moved into the house in late December, right before school let out for winter break, which had been a major hassle with Christmas right around the corner. Every Christmas, we always think back on this one Christmas Eve which changed the way we thought of the holiday. Anyway, it was Christmas Eve night and we had all just finished eating and I was getting ready for bed. Around this time in my life, I was maturing and became skeptical of whether or not Santa was real. I mean, I'm sure every child thinks of this at one point. For a few years, I had these little cool tree cameras that stay on for hours, and earlier that day I had hid them somewhere so they could be filming the tree. Now, in my mind, I thought I would catch my parents in the act of placing presents under the tree. But to my surprise, when I turned on the cameras, the presents had already been there. I jumped with excitement, trying to be as quiet as possible. But that's when I saw something else appear from the corner of the camera. I take a look at my iPad where the live feed was connected to, and saw someone appearing from the hallway. Now, in my 10-year-old state of mind, I immediately thought it was Santa Claus. However, upon a closer look, I came to the realization that it wasn't Santa at all, but rather some guy who I've never seen before wearing nothing that even resembled Santa. I knew that it couldn't have been my dad, as my dad is way bigger, and it definitely wasn't my mom. It was at this point when I came to the realization that there was someone in the damn house. My eyes filled with fear as I saw this person proceed to take the presents and put them in a black garbage bag. Trying not to scream at this point, I go over quietly to my parents' room and explain what was taking place in the living room. At first, they woke up annoyed and didn't seem to take me seriously. But once I showed them my tablet, my dad then grabs his crowbar that he keeps under his bed and runs out into the room. He goes out into the living room, screaming like a madman when I hear a loud bang followed by my dad screaming. My mom and I run over to him and find him on the floor holding his right shoulder. It was then when I realized that my dad had been shot. It didn't take long for my mom to get on the phone and have the police show up. But like in most situations like this, the man was gone and had took half of the gifts. Turns out, this man had broken into our house through the sunroom and somehow found his way to the presents. I'm not sure why we were the only ones targeted, but I didn't want to know. Fortunately, my dad had survived the shooting and recovered within a few days. Either way, this was the most terrifying encounter of my life.
This happened Christmas of so many years ago. It's been a long time. The first smartphones weren't even out yet. I was supposed to take a trip with my family to a small place in the woods. As they put it, they wanted to get away from it all. Santa knew where we would be. I was a teenager at the time, and I still believed in a magic man that could track us anywhere we went. So we packed up our things for Christmas and New Year's and left for the little house my parents owned. When we got there, as usual, the place was dusty and cold. We spent the next day or so cleaning up the place from how we'd left it the year before, getting up all the dust and such. We all had no clue that we'd be in for more than just a little dust and dirt. We were in the middle of the woods. So the first night, we'd had a pretty good time doing things together as a family, and enjoying each other as families should do. The night was peaceful, other than the rats that would sometimes fly through the attic and make noise. We weren't going to let that ruin our stay, though. So about 2 days before Christmas Day, my mom noticed things started going missing. It wasn't really anything important, but we attributed them to just being misplaced. We never found them, however. When it was time to go to bed, though, is when things started happening. At some point during the night, I could hear rats in the attic bouncing around. I probably wasn't going to get any sleep if they kept doing that. I lay in bed listening to them, but they would stop most of the time. All of a sudden, I heard what sounds like something in the attic being thrown, such as a large box. This woke my parents up, and Dad went to go check it out. Before he could get all the way up the ladder, we heard glass break, and he ran the rest of the way up. There was a small window in the attic, and it was broken. The thing that fell was obviously a stack of boxes that were neatly placed up there. There's no way a normal-sized rat would have been able to knock them over. To my knowledge, I'd have trouble knocking them down. We put a temporary bag on the window to keep the cold out, and we went back to bed. For the rest of the night and the next morning, everything was quiet again. The day went smoothly, and my sister and I went a little into the woods to explore a bit. We found nothing of interest. We came back and had dinner. A little before nightfall, we started hearing the rats again. They were a few and far between, but they were up there in the attic making noise again. Again that night, the little demons were up there doing their thing. Once I got tired of it, I started to climb the ladder to shoo them away. I got the fright of my life. My dad was still up there feeding the fireplace and heard me scream. He came running to catch me as I fell down off the ladder. I told him there was a guy up there. Dad bolted up the ladder and into the attic. He called down to me that he didn't see anyone now. There was now a huge hole in the window again. Down below the window outside, we saw where someone had landed on the ground and footprints scampering off. We had a guy that was coming into the house. Who knows how he got in and got into the attic, but somehow he did. My guess was that there was a hole somewhere that we couldn't find. There's no possible way he could have climbed all the way up to the window, gotten in, and broke it on his way out because the lock was stuck to lock. I didn't feel safe anymore, and my sister was mostly oblivious to what was going on anyways. Mom and Dad had agreed that they needed to get us out of there, and we packed up and left. In the days following Christmas and New Year's, Dad went back up to the house to try to catch someone coming in, but never found anyone. He repaired the window, and it never got broken again. He became so paranoid at one point that something was going to happen to us, that he ended up selling the house and buying one somewhere else so that we could continue our little tradition without the fear of the same guy coming up to the house and breaking in. It still baffles me to think how he got in without coming through the door. It still doesn't make any sense to me, and it probably never will.
This happened over 20 years ago. I was driving back home with my girlfriend at that time. It was Christmas Eve, and my mother's family used to hold a large celebration at my aunt's house in Estacada. This was my girlfriend's first time meeting with my extended family, but she got on quite well with them. We spent the majority of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking an assortment of adult beverages. My girlfriend had been quite inebriated by the time we had to leave. Therefore, I'd be driving us home. It was around 11 p.m. or so. I was driving my girlfriend's car along Highway 211. Now, this stretch of road is surrounded by farms and dense patches of forest, and parts of it are unlit. But nothing to fear. I grew up in this area, so I knew this road like the back of my hand. The both of us were driving and talking away, Just two young lovers making the most of our moment together. There was a portion of the highway that descends down an enormous hill before crossing Deep Creek. Surrounding both sides of the road are thick forest. There are no lights, and the only thing we could see was the area directly in front of our headlights. I drove down the hill, crossed the bridge, and uphill through more forest. It's as the highway starts to flatten out that this happens. Something sprints across the road so suddenly that I almost hit whatever it was. I slam on the brakes. I turned to my girlfriend and asked her if she saw it. She confirmed that she had, but she couldn't make out what it was. Maybe it was a coyote, as they are a fairly common sight in this area. But something felt off about it. Whatever it was that ran in front of my car disappeared into the woods next to the road. Coyotes don't usually just dart out in front of cars. Not like that anyway. So for some reason, I decided to check it out. I turned the car around and switched on the high beams to better light up the forest in which this thing had vanished in. I stepped out of the car and walked towards the woods. I don't see anything, but now it feels like perhaps I've made a grave error. My heart was pounding and the hairs on the back of my neck are standing at full attention, but I don't see anything unusual in the trees. Suddenly, the car's horn blasts. It's not a that you'd get if, say, your driver or passenger wanted you to hurry up and get in the car. No, this was a long blaring. I walked back into the car and asked my girlfriend why she'd lean on the horn like that. She said nothing. Instead, she pointed to a spot about 50 feet from where I was standing. I looked over in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Surely, this was the thing that ran in front of our car. It was a man. He was completely naked. His skin was covered in dirt and mud, and in one of his hands, he was holding a hatchet. He looked back at us, and then, just before turning around and walking back into the forest. Needless to say, we got the hell out of there. Once we were safely driving again, my girlfriend explained what had just happened. While I was trying to look for the man in the area he initially vanished in, he circled back around and came out from another spot in the forest, just beyond my car headlights. My girlfriend had seen something out of the corner of her eye, and that's when she saw him. Before she honked the horn, he was walking towards me, his hatchet raised as if making to strike me. We called the authorities once we got safely back home, but they never found anybody, or they did and just didn't tell us. But the officer we spoke to explained his theory. This man was obviously looking to ambush unsuspecting lone travelers for Lord only knows what reason. We all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking saved my life, as it let my potential killer know that I wasn't alone out there. I moved back into the area recently, so I now drive that highway often. No naked hatchet man sightings yet, but I can tell you that I'm definitely extra vigilant now, especially near Deep Creek.
This happened to my very close family friends on Christmas Day a few years ago. I used to babysit for this family starting around the age 12, and I later house and dog sat for them months at a time all throughout my 20s. This story is particularly creepy for me because I have spent a ton of time alone in their house. So this family is enjoying a stereotypical Christmas Day evening in the family home. It's winter, and so it's dark early. It's drizzly, wet, and a foggy night outside. It's a large family, and the kids are all grown in their 20s and 30s, most with jobs out of state, but everyone has come home to be together for the holidays. The siblings are busy playing with Xmas loot, TVs are on, Christmas music is playing, and food is being cooked and eaten, and there's a lot of laughing and talking, and all of this goes on for many hours. The youngest daughter spots her dad standing in the middle of the courtyard outside in a black hooded sweatshirt. The hood is over his head, so just his mouth and chin are visible, and he's just looking inside the house. She casually calls over to her mom, who's in the kitchen, to go check on Dad because it seems like he needs help with something in the yard. At this point, the mom says Dad is in the bedroom taking a nap. Mom and sister quickly come to the realization that a creepy total stranger in a black hoodie is just staring at them and not moving on Christmas Day evening. As you can imagine, the family collectively shits enough bricks to build another chimney for Santa. They proceed to alert everyone in the house, running around checking the locks on the many sliding glass doors and windows, and then they wake up Dad. In the meantime, Black Hoodie Creep can see everyone's movements because the house is pretty much completely glass window walls. This guy continues to just stand there intentionally creepy, almost Jason Voorhees-like, pose and not moving, except now he has a sinister smile on his face. It's obvious that he's enjoying being caught. At first, the family thinks it might be a practical joke, and the family members start calling out things to intimidate him, like, "If this is a joke, it's not funny. We already called the cops, and we have a gun." But the guy just keeps standing there, smiling and not moving for a very long time. Then suddenly, he rushes up to the glass and starts pounding on it, not saying a word. His face was still obscured by the hood. He's intentionally trying to scare everyone, if not break into the house. And now the family really does call the cops. After pounding on the glass for a good while, he runs and hops the fence near the home's trash cans and heads to the neighbors' yards. The neighbors are also good friends, so the family calls them and let them know what's going on, but they never saw the black-hooded man. The cops arrive in minutes and take statements. They check the neighboring homes, but never found the guy. Not long after, the family had their courtyard area completely remodeled, including a new security and light system. The scariest bit of the story, they had no idea how long this guy was just standing there, watching them enjoying their Christmas.
This happened back in the early days of my childhood. I was maybe 12 years old at the time, living just outside of a major city in Australia. It was Christmas Eve, and unlike other countries who have their white Christmas, Australia's Christmas is smack dang in the middle of summer. So the last place that you want to be is indoors, unless for some reason your house has an air conditioner, which 90% of the households do not. Since it was Christmas time, school kids were on school holidays, so I invited a friend over and convinced my dad to drive us to a swimming pool complex. It's a pretty large place, with cheapish food and a huge water slide. So naturally, we were pretty content staying the entire day there, spending our parents' money and enjoying the cool water. It started getting later in the day, and we were told that we had to go soon. We begged and pleaded to stay a little bit longer, which led to a compromise that we would have to walk home if we didn't want to leave now. Which we actually have done a couple of times before, since the pool complex wasn't too far from my house. We agreed and said that we would be home soon. It didn't actually take us too long before we wanted to leave, since the sun was setting, and the pool was getting a bit too cold for comfort. We placed towels around our dripping bodies, waved goodbye to the staff at the entrance of the pool, and began the trek home. It usually didn't take us all too long to get home, but today my friend had the brilliant idea to take a shortcut, which in turn actually ended up taking us twice the amount of time to get anywhere near my house. He then joked saying, "At least we know for next time." I called him an idiot and said that we better be home by dark. So we were now getting really close to my house, and it was in fact dark out by the time. My phone was flat, so I was trying to speed walk as fast as I could, so I knew my parents would be wondering where we were. This shortcut we were on took us through some very dark and isolated streets. The suburban roads were narrow with streetlights stretched apart, leaving long, dim spaces of darkness. This was when we heard a car pull into our street. It was about 100 meters behind us. As it got closer to one of the streetlights, we could see its rusty blue van. And wait for it, covered in Christmas decorations. We immediately laughed and exchanged peculiar glances. Our faces turned to a more perturbed nature when the van started slowing down as it approached us. We heard a husky voice call out to us. I didn't quite hear what he said, but he was clearly trying to get our attention, and he definitely had it. We finally got a look at this guy, and wow, the smell was the first thing to hit our noses. Try to imagine rotten bananas mixed with a heavy scent of alcohol. I don't know why I said bananas, but that's honestly what it smelled like. He was wearing a Santa hat and asked us if we'd been good this year. He then reached into the back of his van and pulled out a red box that had been wrapped like a Christmas present. He then gestured for us to come closer. We said we really needed to be going, as our parents would be wondering where we were. He then pulled the greasiest smile that I've ever seen and offered to give us a lift to our house, and not to his torture chamber. This guy must have been pretty intoxicated to think that this was going to work on us. We said no thank you, as our house was just a few blocks over, and sped up our pace. We thought that this would make this guy go away, but he slowly cruised on the right side of us, trying to persuade us to get into his van, saying that he got loads of presents in the back, and that he doesn't know what to do with them. My friend started getting a little impatient, and told the guy that we didn't want his greasy presents. This seemed to piss him off, and he told us that we'd be on Santa's naughty list. He then drove 10 meters in front of us, swung his passenger door open, and said, "Look, the present is in the seat if you want to take it. You take it, I don't mind." We were now staying as far away from this guy's van as possible, staying off the path and onto people's lawns as we were walking. When we reached the point where we'd be walking past the van, I shit you not, we heard someone sneeze from the back of the van. My eyes looked into his, and I just pulled out my phone and said, "I'm calling the police." He spat on the ground in front of us, and then sped off down the road. We then bolted down a side route I knew took me directly to my house. Our adrenaline kept us fueled enough to run all the way home. When we got to my driveway, we agreed not to tell my parents, as they wouldn't let us go out at night again if they knew what had happened. I kinda wanted to tell him, but my friend insisted that we should keep it quiet and never take that shortcut ever again. We never saw the man again, and hoped no one fell for those presents he was offering. So, greasy Santa guy in the white van, let's not meet again.
Posted by Spooky Red. A man approached me and my kids in a deserted mall parking lot at 10 o'clock at night and started talking to my kids. So this happened about 5 years ago while I was 9 months pregnant. I was Christmas shopping at the mall with my then 7 and 15-year-old daughters one Saturday night in a very safe city with a very low crime rate. There was an Applebee's connected to the mall, and we ended our shopping pretty late, and the mall stores were starting to close. So I took my kids to the connected Applebee's for a late dinner. We finish up eating at about 10 p.m. and leave out the Applebee's entrance into the practically deserted parking lot with shopping bags in tow. As we got to the car, I was in the middle of maneuvering the shopping bags on my arms to find my keys, when a 50-ish-year-old crusty-looking guy starts walking up from somewhere in the parking lot, with shaggy, gray, white hair and a faded flannel shirt and old jeans. I noticed him briskly approaching when he was about 40 feet away, and he said, "This is a stick-up. Give me all your money." My blood ran cold, and I stared at him owlishly and shakingly said, "What?" He then said he was just kidding, and came up and stood right next to my daughters, who were standing on the other side of the car, waiting for me to unlock the car to let them in. He then starts making small talk with me and my girls. He's asking things like if they were being good girls for Santa, how old they were, if we got all our Christmas shopping done, what kind of things did we get, etc. He didn't seem drunk, high, slow, or mentally challenged at all. He was very coherent and seemed of sound mind. Mind you, I was a heavily pregnant woman, alone with my 2 daughters in a mostly deserted parking lot at 10 o'clock at night, who was being approached by a stranger who came and stood right next to my kids on the other side of the car, just shooting the breeze, talking to me and my kids with his hands in his pockets and occasionally looking over his shoulder. I didn't want to aggravate him, so I was politely conversing with him and trying to look calm and nonchalant while trying to disguise my frantic hands digging inside my giant purse for my car keys. This exchange went on for a couple minutes while he periodically kept looking over his shoulder. I was silently panicking and trying to politely keep the situation from escalating by calmly and nonchalantly talking to him while also trying in vain to find my damned car keys and get us out of there. They were in there hiding good. I felt that at any moment he was going to pull a knife or gun or rob me, and my kids were right next to him, away from their mother on the other side of the car, and I couldn't find my fucking car keys to get my kids into the safety of the car. He kept trying to engage them in conversation, and I could see that my oldest daughter was a little weirded out. She kept glancing at me to gauge my assessment or reaction to this situation. Kids often tend to not recognize potential danger when they are with their parents, since they see us as their protectors. And being that he was only talking and acting friendly, and I was doing my best to stay calm, they were oblivious to the alarming situation we all were in, and being 9 months pregnant, and that I was no match for this full-grown man, especially if he was hiding a weapon on him. While still desperately digging for my keys, I tried to politely give him hints that the conversation was over by saying things like, "It was nice chatting with you, but I gotta get these kids to bed," and "It was nice meeting you," and telling my girls to say that it was nice meeting him too. My polite attempts to get this guy to leave wasn't working because he kept sidestepping my attempts and asking them what their favorite school subjects are and how nice young ladies they were, etc., while I was struggling with the shopping bags and digging in my giant cluttered purse for my car keys. My outgoing 7-year-old was completely oblivious to how not okay this situation was, because he was being friendly and because of the whole "I'm with mommy so I'm safe" child mentality. So she started to talk about what she picked out for Daddy for Christmas, and started enthusiastically talking about kid stuff, and asking him if he knew what Minecraft was, etc., and keeping this creep from leaving us alone by keeping him engaged in conversation. They didn't realize that I was becoming desperate to get them the hell out of there. Then I suddenly had this sinking feeling of dread when I realized that I may have lost my keys in the mall, and that we were stuck outside with this strange man who kept looking over his shoulders and was showing no signs of walking away. And I was thinking that he was waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. All that he had to do was grab one of my girls and threaten their life, knowing it would make me do whatever he wanted as long as he wouldn't hurt them. I started to feel my adrenaline start to spike, and my heart and stomach started doing flip-flops, and I felt like at any moment shit was going to go down as the gravity of realizing that there were no other people or witnesses around and that we were totally alone with him at that moment. The odds were stacked against us, and that he has his chance. Then, he all of a sudden was like, "Okay, it was nice talking with you, see you later," and walked off in the same direction as to which he came. It wasn't until then I found my car keys and unlocked the car and told my kids to get in fast, and I got into and locked the doors, and started the car and drove the hell out of there. My 15-year-old lightheartedly and jokingly said, "Okay, that was weird," and laughed. I was overwhelmed with relief, and then I was confused over what just happened. I thought to myself, why the hell would a guy of seemingly sound mind think it totally acceptable to go out of his way just to approach a woman and her kids in a deserted parking lot late at night just to chit-chat? But being that nothing bad happened, I brushed it off and joked about it too. When we got home, my husband greeted us and asked us how shopping went. I said it went well, and my 15-year-old told him what happened in the parking lot and how weird it was, and was kind of joking about it. I started joking too, saying how I was mentally having a panic attack while trying to look calm, and I started making fun of myself by telling my husband how I was attempting to inconspicuously rummage through my purse to find my car keys. My husband went completely white, and I acknowledged his horrified look of alarm, and I assured him that, albeit creepy, the guy was just talking and eventually left on his own. Now, my father-in-law is a retired sheriff deputy, and my husband went through the police academy training after graduating high school. He decided to go to business school instead of becoming a cop, and being that the knowledge he gained from that, plus growing up with a cop for a dad, I found out why my husband looked absolutely horrified when I told him the details. What my husband told me completely rattled me to the bone. My husband told me that he was 100% sure that the reason why that guy was hanging around us and chit-chatting was because he was waiting for me to unlock my car. And the reason why he was standing next to our kids was because once I unlocked the car and the kids started to get inside, He was most likely going to force himself into the car with the kids and hold a knife or gun to them to gain leverage on me, to force me to cooperate knowing that I wouldn't abandon my kids, which would then force me to get into the car and with them and do whatever he wanted me to do, which most likely would be to drive to a remote location and do God knows what. And being that he wasn't wearing a mask suggests that his intentions were to also leave no witnesses to identify him. I then remember that he was positioned by the backseat passenger door where my 7-year-old was standing by waiting to get in. My husband then told me that the most likely reason why the guy ended up leaving was because it took so long for me to find my keys, and the longer it took, the more anxious and spooked it made him. And that whole time, I was desperate to find my car keys, which through some sort of divine intervention stayed hidden in my purse, thus saving us from potentially being abducted.
When I was 12, my mom took my cousin, who was 1 year younger than I, and my best friend at the time, and I shopping at Walmart during the Christmas season. A little backstory. I was mature for my age and frequently went places alone, like the movies or the mall, or wandered the store alone while my mom shopped and had never had any issues before. So we all walked in the store, and us girls made a beeline for the holiday section while my mom did her shopping. They had these huge, man-sized Santa and snowman figures that could dance and sing carols on display for sale. Well, someone before us, they were like this when we happened upon them, had moved the figures so they faced each other, and when they sang and danced, their stomachs and pelvises smacked into each other. A dumb prank. They were turned on as we walked up, and I just remember standing there staring at these two stupid huge things sing and hump each other. As we watched, I heard a deep voice giggle and say, "Heh, girls, pretty fun, huh? Do you like watching that?" My cousin and I side-eyed each other and just stood there unsure of what to do. I knew he was being gross, but I was very young, still didn't know the specifics of sex yet. He ended up asking, "Do you want to watch again?" I said no and grabbed her hand. We left that section, and he did not follow us. So I thought. We ended up in the toy section looking at Barbies. I feel someone looking at me, so I glance up, and the creepy man from the Christmas department is at the end of the aisle staring at us. Suddenly he's walking towards us, and I remember my body going cold, and I grabbed my cousin's hands. "Come on, we have to go," I said, yanking her arm hard. She was completely oblivious to the guy and said, "No!" while stomping her feet down. I dug my nails into her arm, and she finally looked up, saw him coming towards us, and let me pull her away. The creepy guy followed us out of the aisle and said, "Little bitch," to me, with an angry look on his face. We ran through the store until we reached my mom. I remember she was at the craft department. I think we told her we saw a creepy guy, but not that he had followed us around or yelled at me. To this day, I don't know why I downplayed it to her, maybe for fear that I would lose some freedom. So, Christmas pervert, let's not meet again. If you are new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.